I've worked security at the Riverside Natural History Museum for 12 years, and what happened on October 15, 2023, still haunts my dreams. That night taught me that some people's obsessions run deeper than anyone could imagine. It was a typical rainy Thursday evening when I began my final walkthrough before locking up. The museum closes at 6 p.m., and by 7:30, I'd cleared the building of stragglers, families with tired kids, elderly couples reading every placard. Standard procedure was to check each exhibit hall, secure the loading dock, and set the overnight alarm system. I was making my rounds through the Native American Heritage Wing when I noticed something odd. In the pottery display case, there was a new piece I'd never seen before, a small clay bowl with intricate geometric patterns. It looked authentic, sitting right next to the museum's legitimate artifacts. The placard read, "Ancestral Pueblo and Water Vessel, circa 1200 C, donated by M. Whitman." That stopped me cold. I'd been here long enough to know every piece in our permanent collection, and I'd never heard of any M. Whitman donation. Plus, new acquisitions went through months of authentication and cataloging before going on display. They didn't just appear overnight. I radioed my supervisor, Marcus Johnson, who was doing paperwork in the administrative office. "Hey Marcus, we got a problem in the Heritage Wing. There's an unauthorized item in display case H7. "What kind of item?" His voice crackled through the radio. "Looks like a pottery bowl. Professional placard and everything, but it's not in our catalog system." Marcus arrived 5 minutes later, his keys jingling as he examined the case. "This is impossible," he muttered, checking his tablet against our collection database. "No M. Whitman in our donor records, no recent acquisitions matching this description. How the hell did someone get into a locked display case?" The cases used electronic locks tied to our security system. Only 4 people had access codes: Marcus, our curator Dr. Patricia Chin, the assistant curator, and the head of security. The system logged every entry with a timestamp and ID badge scan. We checked the logs. The case had been opened at 4:17 p.m., during museum hours, when dozens of visitors were present. But the ID used was mine. "I was in the gift shop at 4:17, helping with the register," I told Marcus. "Linda can verify that. I never went near the Heritage Wing this afternoon." Marcus's expression darkened. He immediately called Dr. Chin, explaining the situation while I continued examining the mysterious bowl. The craftsmanship was exquisite, too good to be a modern reproduction, but something felt off about the aging patterns. Dr. Chin arrived within 30 minutes, her gray hair damp from the rain. She took one look at the bowl and her face went pale. "This is from the Hartwell collection," she whispered. The Hartwell collection was legendary in museum circles, a private assemblage of Native American artifacts that had disappeared in the 1980s when collector Robert Hartwell died under mysterious circumstances. His estate claimed the collection was stolen, but pieces occasionally surfaced at black market auctions. Museums worldwide had standing orders to report any Hartwell items to the FBI. "We need to call the police," Dr. Chin said, photographing the bowl from every angle. "This is a federal matter now." But as we prepared to secure the scene, I noticed something else that made my blood run cold. The adjacent display case, our Plains Indian beadwork exhibit, had a new item too. A pair of moccasins I'd never seen before, with a placard reading, "Lakota Ceremonial Footwear, 1890, donated by M. Whitman." Marcus checked the electronic logs again. That case had been opened at 4:23 p.m., also using my security credentials. "Someone's been here for hours," I realized. "They've been systematically adding pieces to our collection during visiting hours, using a clone badge." Dr. Chin was already moving to the next exhibit hall, her flashlight beam dancing across the displays. In the Natural Sciences wing, we found 2 more additions, a mineral specimen in the geology section and a preserved butterfly in the entomology display. Both bore the same M. Whitman donor credits. The sophistication was staggering. The placards matched our museum's exact formatting, font, and paper stock. The items were positioned perfectly within existing displays, as if they'd always belonged there. Someone had studied our collection intimately and possessed museum-quality artifacts to place. Whoever did this has been planning for months, Marcus said, his voice tight with concern. They know our procedures, our security protocols, even our display standards. We decided to conduct a complete inventory check, starting with the most valuable exhibits. In the paleontology hall, nestled among our legitimate fossil displays, we discovered what appeared to be a genuine Triceratops tooth, worth potentially thousands of dollars. That's when I heard it, a soft shuffling sound from the direction we'd just come from. Did you hear that? I whispered, gripping my flashlight. Marcus nodded, pulling out his radio to call for police backup. But the sound came again, footsteps, deliberate and measured, coming from the Heritage Wing. Someone was still in the building. We moved back toward the Native American exhibits, our flashlight beams cutting through the darkness between the emergency lighting strips. The museum after hours felt different, larger, more oppressive, with shadows that seemed to shift and move. As we approached the Heritage Wing, I saw her. A woman in her 50s, wearing dark clothing and a museum volunteer badge, was carefully placing another artifact into a display case. She worked with practiced efficiency, using what appeared to be a security bypass device on the electronic lock. "Ma'am, the museum is closed," Marcus called out, his voice authoritative but not aggressive. "You need to leave immediately." She turned toward us, and I saw her face clearly for the first time. Margaret Whitman, M. Whitman. I recognized her from the volunteer orientation photos, though she'd stopped volunteering about 6 months earlier after what Dr. Chen had described as some disagreements about proper collection management. "I'm improving the collection," she said calmly, continuing her work. "These pieces belong here. They're finally home." Margaret had been a dedicated volunteer for 3 years, working primarily in the archives and helping with artifact cataloging. She'd demonstrated extensive knowledge of Native American cultures and had even assisted with several authentication projects. But according to Dr. Chen, she'd become increasingly obsessive about the museum's collection, suggesting acquisitions that were far beyond our budget and questioning the provenance of existing pieces. "Mrs. Whitman, what you're doing is illegal," Marcus said, stepping closer. "These artifacts need to be properly acquired and authenticated before." "They are authentic," she interrupted sharply. "More authentic than half the reproductions you people display as genuine artifacts. I've spent my inheritance acquiring these pieces from private collectors and estate sales. They deserve better than sitting in some rich person's private collection." The full scope of her operation was becoming clear. Margaret had been using her volunteer access and knowledge to gradually infiltrate our collection with stolen or illegally acquired artifacts, each one potentially worth thousands of dollars. The cloned security badge allowed her to work during museum hours when her presence wouldn't seem suspicious. "The Hartwell pieces alone are worth a fortune," Dr. Chen had told us earlier. "If she's been systematically placing them in museums, she could be running a massive money laundering operation." But as Margaret continued placing artifacts, her motivation seemed more complex than simple profit. She spoke about each piece with genuine reverence, explaining their cultural significance and historical importance. This wasn't just theft, it was obsession. "You don't understand," she said, tears streaming down her face. "These artifacts are dying in private collections, locked away where no one can appreciate them, study them, learn from them. Here, they can educate people. They can preserve culture." Marcus had managed to alert security and the police, but Margaret seemed oblivious to the consequences of her actions. She continued working methodically, placing what appeared to be a ceremonial knife in the weapons display. "How long have you been doing this?" I asked, genuinely curious about the scope of her operation. 6 months, she replied. "Every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon. I'd arrive during normal visiting hours, blend in with the crowds, then use the badge to access the cases. I've added 47 pieces to your collection. The museum is finally becoming what it should be, a real repository of cultural heritage." The police arrived 10 minutes later, led by Detective Sarah Rodriguez of the Sacramento Metro Police. Margaret didn't resist arrest, but she kept talking about her contributions to the museum and how future visitors would benefit from seeing real artifacts instead of cheap reproductions. The investigation revealed the full extent of Margaret's operation. She'd liquidated her late husband's estate and spent over $200,000 acquiring artifacts from questionable sources. Some pieces were legitimate purchases from estate sales, but others appeared to be stolen from private collections or archaeological sites. The FBI's art crime team took over the case, as several of the artifacts were on international watch lists. Margaret's donations included pieces from the missing Hartwell collection, artifacts stolen from the Denver Museum of Nature and Science in 2019, and items that may have been illegally excavated from protected tribal lands. Dr. Chin spent weeks working with federal agents to catalog and authenticate Margaret's additions. Some pieces were returned to their rightful owners, while others became evidence in ongoing investigations into black market artifact trafficking. The most disturbing discovery came from Margaret's home. In her basement, investigators found a complete replica of our museum's floor plan, detailed notes on our security procedures, and over 200 additional artifacts waiting to be donated to museums across the state. Margaret had targeted 7 other institutions with similar operations, gradually building collections she believed were more authentic than the official displays. Her obsession with cultural preservation had twisted into something darker, a delusion that she alone understood the true value of these artifacts. During her interview, she told police, "Future generations will thank me. I was saving these pieces from people who saw them as investments rather than sacred objects. The museums are where they belong." Margaret Whitman pleaded guilty to federal charges including theft of cultural artifacts, money laundering, and conspiracy to traffic stolen goods. She received 8 years in federal prison and was ordered to pay $1.2 million in restitution. The museum implemented new security protocols after the incident, including biometric scanners for display case access and randomized volunteer schedules. But the Margaret Whitman case taught us something unsettling about the people we trust with our cultural institutions. Sometimes the greatest threat to a collection comes from those who love it most. I still work at the Riverside Natural History Museum, but I look at every volunteer differently now. The passion that drives someone to dedicate their time to preserving culture can, under the right circumstances, transform into something dangerous. Have you ever encountered someone whose dedication to a cause seemed to cross the line into obsession? What's the most extreme thing you've seen someone do in the name of protecting something they cared about? I've been in executive protection for 15 years, working for Titan Security Services out of Austin, Texas. What happened while guarding Tech CEO Jonathan Mitchell in March 2024 still makes me check my mirrors obsessively. Sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who study you first, learning your every move before they strike. It started as a routine assignment. Mitchell, CEO of Apex Technologies, had received credible death threats after his company launched controversial AI surveillance software that civil liberties groups claimed violated privacy rights. The FBI recommended executive protection, and my firm assigned me as his primary detail. The first week followed standard protocol. I drove Mitchell in his armored 2022 Mercedes S-Class between his $3.2 million mansion in Westlake Hills, the downtown corporate headquarters on Congress Avenue, and various business meetings across Austin. Basic route variations, advanced security sweeps, coordination with building security teams. Nothing unusual for a high-profile tech executive facing public backlash. That changed on Thursday, March 8th, when I first noticed the silver 2019 Honda Civic. I spotted it during our morning commute on Loop 360, maintaining position 3 cars back in the right lane. Standard 4-door sedan, dark tinted windows, Texas plates ending in 73. In this business, you develop an instinct for vehicles that appear too frequently in your operational environment. This one immediately pinged my surveillance detection radar. Professional executive protection requires constant awareness of your environment. You memorize license plates, note vehicle positions, and track any anomalies in traffic patterns. The Honda's positioning was too perfect, maintaining optimal surveillance distance while avoiding direct line of sight with our vehicle. I took an unscheduled detour through the Arboretum shopping district, turning onto Research Boulevard without signaling. The Honda followed, maintaining the same distance and lane position. When I pulled into a Starbucks parking lot for a deliberate surveillance check, it drove past without stopping, but I caught a clear glimpse of the driver through his windshield. White male, mid-30s, wearing a dark baseball cap and wraparound sunglasses. "Sir, we may have a surveillance problem," I told Mitchell over the intercom system. "I'm implementing evasive protocols to confirm." Mitchell, reviewing quarterly financial reports in the back seat, barely looked up from his tablet. "Just get me to the office on time, David. The board meeting starts at 9 sharp, and we're discussing the Q1 earnings projection." I spent the next 25 minutes running standard counter-surveillance maneuvers, sudden lane changes, unexpected U-turns, parking garage entries and exits, doubling back on previous routes. The Honda vanished after my third evasive maneuver, but my gut told me this wasn't over. 15 years in this business teaches you to trust those instincts. That afternoon, leaving Apex headquarters on East Cesar Chavez Street, I spotted the Honda again. Different position this time, parked across the street near a food truck, engine running, same driver behind the wheel. He'd repositioned for our departure, suggesting knowledge of our schedule and route preferences. This time I managed to get a partial plate reading, 8GF73. I immediately radioed our control center to run the registration through law enforcement databases. "David, that plate comes back to a 2019 Honda Civic registered to Marcus Webb, age 34, Arlington address on Fielder Road," came the response within minutes. "Clean criminal record, no outstanding warrants or federal flags. Vehicle registration current, no liens or financial issues. Marcus Webb." The name meant nothing to me, but the pattern was becoming clear. This wasn't random surveillance. Someone was conducting systematic intelligence gathering on my principal's movements, security procedures, and operational patterns. Over the next week, Webb's surveillance operation became increasingly sophisticated. He began using different vehicles: a gray 2020 Toyota Camry with Oklahoma plates, a black 2018 Ford Explorer with tinted windows, even a white Ford Transit van with fake Austin Electrical Services magnetic door signs that I confirmed didn't match any legitimate local business. The guy understood executive protection protocols. He never followed the same route twice, instead positioning himself at natural choke points where our route options were geographically limited. He anticipated our movements, staying just outside our standard detection patterns while maintaining visual contact with our convoy. Most concerning, he seemed to know our schedule with accuracy that suggested either inside information or extensive preliminary surveillance. He was waiting in position before we arrived, rather than following us from our departure points. "Sir, we need to discuss upgrading your security posture immediately," I told Mitchell during a secure conversation in his corner office on the 14th floor of the Apex building. "This individual has maintained active surveillance for 8 consecutive days. His knowledge of our operational patterns suggests either insider information or extensive planning and preparation." Mitchell finally gave me his undivided attention, setting down his phone and closing his laptop. "What specifically are you recommending, David?" "Additional detail members to provide overlapping coverage, varied departure times to disrupt his timing, use of decoy vehicles to confuse surveillance, and temporary relocation to a secure facility while we investigate his background and intentions." "Absolutely not," Mitchell replied firmly, his voice carrying the authority that had built a billion-dollar tech company. "I won't let some stalker disrupt my business operations or affect our upcoming product launch. Handle this situation quietly and professionally." But Webb wasn't just conducting passive surveillance anymore. He was beginning to escalate his activities in ways that demonstrated increasing boldness and concerning psychological investment in our operations. On Friday, March 16th, I discovered he'd made direct contact. I found a manila envelope tucked under the windshield wiper of my personal vehicle, a 2020 Ford F-150 Super Crew parked in my assigned space at my apartment complex in Cedar Park. Inside was a single 8x10 color photograph, me and Mitchell walking into Archie Restaurant on South Lamar, where we'd had dinner the previous Tuesday evening with potential Japanese investors. The photo was taken with a telephoto lens from across the street, showing clear detail of both our faces, the restaurant entrance, and the timestamp from a nearby traffic camera visible in the background. No note, no demands, no explanation, just the photograph. The message was unmistakably clear. I can see you, I can get close to you personally, and your current security measures cannot prevent my access. I immediately contacted Detective Lisa Martinez with the Austin Police Department's Threat Assessment Unit, a specialized division that handles stalking cases involving public figures and high-profile individuals. She agreed to run Webb's background more thoroughly while I implemented enhanced security protocols for both Mitchell and myself. The investigation revealed deeply disturbing details about Marcus Webb's history and psychological profile. Webb was a former U.S. Army military intelligence specialist who'd served 2 deployments in Afghanistan before being discharged in 2019 for what his service record vaguely described as behavioral issues incompatible with continued service. Since his military discharge, Webb had worked briefly for 2 different private security firms, Guardian Executive Services in Dallas and Lone Star Protection in Houston. Both companies had terminated his employment within 6 months for what their HR records documented as inappropriate conduct toward clients and concerning behavior during protective assignments. More alarming, Webb had been arrested twice for stalking-related offenses. The first incident in 2021 involved a female coworker at Guardian Executive Services who reported that Webb had been following her home, photographing her apartment building, and leaving gifts at her workplace. The second arrest occurred in 2022 when he targeted a local Austin news anchor, conducting surveillance of her home and workplace for over 3 months. Both criminal cases had been dismissed on procedural technicalities, evidence collection issues in the first case, and the statute of limitations expiring in the second due to prosecutorial delays. But the behavioral pattern was unmistakable and deeply concerning. This individual has a documented fixation on people in positions of power, authority, or public attention, Detective Martinez explained during our meeting at APD headquarters. His military intelligence training makes him particularly dangerous. He understands surveillance techniques, has weapons proficiency, and knows exactly how executive protection details operate from the inside. She paused, reviewing Webb's psychological evaluation from his military discharge. The Army's assessment mentions obsessive personality traits and difficulty maintaining appropriate professional boundaries. Combined with his stalking history, this suggests escalating behavior that could turn violent. The situation reached a critical point on Wednesday, March 20th, when Webb's surveillance transformed into active operational interference. I was conducting a routine advanced security sweep of the Fairmont Austin Hotel on Red River Street, where Mitchell had scheduled a crucial lunch meeting with a consortium of venture capital investors considering a $200 million funding round for Apex's expansion into European markets. Standard advance protocol required arriving 30 minutes before the principal, coordinating with hotel security management, sweeping the route from valet parking to the private dining room, and establishing secure communications with our backup team positioned in the lobby. As I walked through the elegant marble lobby, reviewing my checklist with the hotel's security director, I spotted Webb immediately. He was sitting casually in the Red Oak bar area, dressed in expensive business attire, navy blazer, white dress shirt, gray slacks, reading a Wall Street journal and sipping coffee. He appeared to be any other affluent hotel guest conducting business. But I recognized his profile instantly, despite the upscale disguise and the fact that he'd shaved his beard since our last sighting. The positioning was perfect for observing both the main lobby entrance and the elevator bank leading to the private dining facilities. Webb noticed me too. Instead of leaving or attempting to conceal his presence, he looked directly at me, smiled slightly, and raised his coffee cup in a mock toast. The casual boldness was absolutely chilling. He wanted me to know he was there, wanted me to understand that he could access any location where my principal conducted business. I immediately called Mitchell, who was en route with our backup driver in the armored Mercedes. Sir, the surveillance subject is inside the hotel. He's positioned to observe all access points to your meeting location. I strongly recommend canceling this meeting and implementing emergency relocation protocols. Damn it, David. Mitchell's voice carried frustration and mounting anger. These are major investors from Goldman Sachs and Kleiner Perkins. I cannot keep canceling critical business meetings because of one obsessed individual. Find another solution. But Webb wasn't conducting passive observation anymore. As I watched from across the lobby, he approached the hotel concierge desk and began asking detailed questions, gesturing toward the elevators, the private dining areas, and the hotel's service corridors. I could see him taking notes on a small pad. He was conducting active reconnaissance in real time, gathering tactical information about the hotel's layout, security procedures, staff schedules, and access protocols. This was operational planning, not simple surveillance. He was preparing for something. I made the tactical decision to confront him directly, despite the risk of escalating the situation. Sometimes direct confrontation can disrupt a stalker's psychological investment and force them to retreat. Mr. Webb, I said, approaching his table in the bar area with confident but non-threatening body language. I'm David Chen with Titan Security Services. We need to have a conversation. He looked up calmly, as if he'd been expecting this interaction for days. His demeanor was relaxed, almost pleased. Mr. Chen, you're very good at your job. I've been genuinely impressed with your professionalism and tactical awareness over the past few weeks. What do you want with my client? I asked directly, maintaining eye contact while positioning myself to block his view of the lobby and elevator access. Webb smiled, carefully folding his newspaper and setting it aside. Want? I don't want anything from Mr. Mitchell specifically. You see, David, may I call you David? I'm not studying him. I'm studying you. The statement hit me like ice water. This entire operation wasn't about Mitchell at all. I was the primary target, the subject of his obsessive surveillance and psychological investment. Executive protection is absolutely fascinating work, Webb continued conversationally, as if we were colleagues discussing professional interests. The psychology of close protection, the tactical considerations, the way you balance operational visibility with discretion. The decision-making process under pressure. I've learned tremendously by watching you operate. I realized Webb had been systematically documenting our security procedures, studying our patterns, analyzing our vulnerabilities, and learning from our operational protocols. But for what ultimate purpose? I used to do work very similar to yours, Webb continued, his voice taking on a nostalgic tone. Overseas protective contracts, high-value target security in hostile environments. Afghanistan, Iraq, some private sector work in Africa. But the domestic private sector is so much more educational. Corporate executives don't have the same security resources as government officials or military contractors. Much more challenging and intellectually stimulating. My radio crackled with Mitchell's driver reporting arrival at the hotel valet station. I had to end this conversation immediately and get Webb away from my principal's location. Sir, you need to leave this hotel property immediately, or I'll have you arrested for stalking, harassment, and criminal trespass. Webb stood up slowly, straightening his expensive blazer and adjusting his tie with deliberate precision. Of course, David. I have everything I came for anyway. He placed a business card on the table with a slight flourish. My consulting rates and contact information, in case Mr. Mitchell ever decides he needs more comprehensive security services. The business card was professionally printed on heavy stock. Web Security Consulting, Threat Assessment, and Vulnerability Analysis. When you need to know how vulnerable you really are. As Webb walked toward the hotel's main exit, moving with military bearing and tactical awareness, he paused near the concierge desk and looked back at me. By the way, David, you might want to check your personal vehicle's oil pressure system. That 2020 F-150 can develop significant problems with the oil pump around 45,000 miles. Especially if someone has been monitoring its maintenance needs. My blood froze completely. My truck had exactly 44,847 miles on the odometer, a specific detail he couldn't possibly have known without direct physical access to the vehicle or its service records. I immediately contacted hotel security and called Detective Martinez, requesting immediate APD response to the Fairmont Austin. But Webb had vanished into downtown traffic, disappearing into the maze of streets around the convention center district. The business card led to a disconnected phone number and a fake address that turned out to be an empty lot in East Austin. Webb had covered his tracks professionally. The investigation that followed revealed the full scope of Webb's sophisticated surveillance operation. Detective Martinez obtained a search warrant for Webb's Arlington apartment, which uncovered a disturbing command center dedicated entirely to studying executive protection operations. Webb had been systematically documenting not just Mitchell's movements and schedule, but our entire security infrastructure. Detailed photographs of all our vehicles, including license plates and equipment configurations. Comprehensive notes on our tactical procedures, route preferences, timing patterns, and communication protocols. Maps showing our standard routes with choke points and vulnerability assessments marked in red ink. Most disturbing, he'd identified my personal residence, my regular gym on Burnett Road, the coffee shop where I stopped most mornings, and even my ex-wife's address in Round Rock. He'd been conducting comprehensive background surveillance on me personally, separate from his operational intelligence gathering on our protective detail. The investigation also revealed that Webb had approached 4 other executive protection firms in Austin, Houston, and Dallas, offering to conduct authorized penetration testing of their security procedures through controlled surveillance exercises. All 4 companies had declined his services, but Webb had continued conducting unauthorized assessments of their operations anyway. Detective Martinez coordinated with federal authorities, as Webb's pattern of interstate stalking and his targeting of multiple security firms suggested potential violations of federal anti-stalking laws and possible terrorism-related surveillance activities. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit provided a psychological profile that was deeply unsettling. Subject exhibits classic signs of professional envy combined with obsessive-compulsive personality disorder. The FBI analyst explained, "He's not trying to harm your client directly. He's trying to prove that he's superior at protection work than you are. The stalking behavior is a demonstration of your vulnerabilities and his tactical superiority." The analyst continued, "This type of individual often escalates to direct confrontation or sabotage when passive surveillance no longer provides sufficient psychological satisfaction. He may attempt to create a security incident that allows him to rescue the client and demonstrate his superior capabilities." Webb was finally arrested 5 days later at a Marriott hotel in Dallas, where he'd been conducting identical surveillance operations on another executive protection team guarding a pharmaceutical company CEO. Dallas PD found him in the hotel parking garage, photographing vehicles and taking notes on security procedures. In Webb's rental car, investigators discovered detailed operational files on 7 different executive protection operations across Texas, Oklahoma, and Louisiana. Our case file was the most extensive, containing over 200 photographs, tactical diagrams, and behavioral analysis notes spanning nearly a month of surveillance. During FBI interrogation, Webb admitted to conducting what he called competitive intelligence gathering on protective details throughout the Southwest. He claimed he was building a professional portfolio to start his own premium executive protection firm, using intelligence gathered from studying other professionals' methods and vulnerabilities. "I was going to offer Mr. Mitchell my services eventually," Webb told federal investigators. "I wanted to demonstrate how inadequate his current protection really was. Show him the vulnerabilities I'd identified, the gaps in coverage, the predictable patterns that made him vulnerable to real threats." Webb's apartment search revealed evidence of similar surveillance operations dating back 2 years, involving at least 12 different security firms and their clients. He'd been systematically studying the executive protection industry, learning from other professionals' methods while building detailed vulnerability assessments. Marcus Webb ultimately pleaded guilty to federal stalking charges, criminal surveillance, and violation of anti-terrorism statutes related to his surveillance of critical infrastructure and corporate executives. He received 6 years in federal prison and was ordered to undergo comprehensive psychological evaluation and treatment for his obsessive behaviors. The case fundamentally changed how I approach executive protection work. Threats don't always come from people targeting your principal directly. Sometimes the most dangerous person is someone targeting you personally, studying your methods, learning your weaknesses, and planning to exploit your professional vulnerabilities for their own psychological gratification or career advancement. I still work executive protection, but I'm significantly more paranoid about surveillance now. Every vehicle that appears twice in our operational environment gets thoroughly investigated. Every person who shows excessive interest in our procedures gets flagged and background checked. Every location we frequent gets advanced security sweeps for unauthorized surveillance equipment. The hardest part of the Webb case is acknowledging that he partially succeeded in his objectives. His month-long surveillance operation did expose legitimate vulnerabilities in our security protocols, gaps in our counter-surveillance measures, and weaknesses in our operational security procedures. We've improved our methods significantly because of what Webb's surveillance taught us about our own limitations, even though his techniques were illegal and potentially dangerous. The irony isn't lost on me that a criminal stalker made us better at our jobs. But I'll never feel completely secure again, knowing that somewhere out there, other Marcus Webbs might be studying us, learning our patterns, and planning their own demonstrations of our vulnerabilities. Have you ever discovered someone was watching your work too closely, studying your professional methods for reasons you didn't understand? What would you do if you found out a competitor or colleague was secretly analyzing your techniques to prove they could do your job better? I've worked loss prevention at the Walmart Supercenter on Highway 183 in Cedar Park for 8 years. What I discovered about employee Jennifer Walsh in April 2024 still gives me nightmares about how well someone can hide in plain sight. It started with small inconsistencies that most people would ignore. As head of security, I notice patterns. Which employees arrive early, who stays late, unusual behavior around merchandise or restricted areas. Jennifer had worked overnight stock crew for 14 months, reliable and unremarkable. But she never seemed to leave. I first noticed it during a random parking lot patrol at 3 a.m. on April 7. Jennifer's shift ended at 7 a.m., but her beat-up 2009 Nissan Altima was always in employee parking when I arrived for my 6 p.m. shift, and still there when overnight security did final sweeps. Maybe she carpools with someone, I thought initially. Lots of employees share rides to save gas money. That theory collapsed when I started paying closer attention. Jennifer would clock out at 7:03 a.m. sharp, walk toward the parking lot with other overnight workers, then disappear. Her car remained in the same spot, space 47 in the back row near the garden center dumpsters. On April 10th, I decided to track her movements after shift change. I positioned myself near the automotive service bay windows with a clear view of employee parking. Jennifer walked out with her usual group, said goodbye to coworkers getting into their vehicles, then continued walking past her own car toward the wooded area behind the store. She vanished into the tree line carrying her purse and a small backpack. 20 minutes later, she emerged from a different section of woods, walked back to her car, and drove away. The timing was too precise to be coincidence. She was hiding somewhere on the property until other employees left, then retrieving something from the woods before departing. I checked our security camera footage from previous weeks. The pattern was consistent. Jennifer would walk past her car, disappear into the woods for 15 to 20 minutes, then return and drive home. But what was she doing back there? The woods behind our store were part of an undeveloped commercial property, thick with cedar trees and underbrush. Homeless camps occasionally appeared back there, but city authorities cleared them regularly. It seemed unlikely Jennifer was living rough. She always appeared clean and well-groomed at work. On April 15th, I discovered the truth was far more disturbing. During a routine security walkthrough at 2 a.m., I noticed something odd in aisle G4, the household goods section. Several air mattresses were missing from their display pegs, but our inventory system showed no sales or shrinkage reports for those items. I checked the security footage. At 1:47 a.m., Jennifer had removed 3 twin-size air mattresses from the display, carried them to the back stockroom, then returned empty-handed. She'd done it casually, as if retrieving merchandise for a customer or restocking. But why would overnight stock crew need air mattresses in the stockroom? I began monitoring Jennifer more closely. Over the next week, I documented a pattern of concerning behavior. She regularly took items from shelves without scanning them through employee purchase procedures. She spent extended periods in sections of the store unrelated to her stocking assignments. She had keys to storage areas that weren't part of her job responsibilities. She frequently volunteered for cleaning duties in remote sections of the building. On April 22nd, I followed Jennifer during her lunch break at 3 a.m. Instead of going to the employee break room, she walked to the back stockroom, then disappeared into a section I'd never seen anyone access. I waited 10 minutes, then investigated. Behind a wall of surplus seasonal merchandise, Christmas decorations stored until November, I found a carefully concealed opening in the stockroom's back wall. Someone had removed several drywall panels, creating an access point to the space between our stockroom and the adjacent vacant storefront that had been empty for 3 years. The opening was hidden behind stacked boxes and only visible from a specific angle. I squeezed through the opening with my flashlight and discovered Jennifer's secret home. She'd been living inside the walls of our Walmart for over a year. The hidden space was approximately 12 feet by 20 feet, originally designed as storage for the vacant storefront. Jennifer had transformed it into a surprisingly comfortable living area using merchandise stolen from our store. 3 air mattresses were arranged as a sleeping area, covered with stolen bedding and pillows. A small camping table held a portable camping stove, canned goods, and basic cooking supplies. She'd rigged battery-powered LED lights throughout the space using merchandise from our automotive section. The organization was meticulous. Stolen clothing hung on makeshift hangers attached to exposed ceiling beams. Personal hygiene items were arranged on shelves built from stolen storage containers. She'd even created a primitive bathroom area using camping toilets and privacy screens. Most disturbing were the notebooks. Jennifer had kept detailed records of her life inside Walmart, employee schedules, security procedures, camera blind spots, and inventory tracking methods. She knew our operations better than most managers. Her journals revealed she'd been gradually stealing merchandise for months, taking only items that wouldn't trigger inventory alerts. A few air mattresses from a large display. Single items from multi-packs. Discontinued merchandise scheduled for clearance. Jennifer had been conducting her own loss prevention analysis, identifying exactly what she could steal without detection. The journals also revealed her motivation. Jennifer had been evicted from her apartment in February 2023 for non-payment of rent. Instead of finding new housing, she decided to live inside Walmart, while maintaining her job and the appearance of normal life. She'd been homeless for 14 months, but nobody knew because she'd never actually left work. Jennifer would clock out, hide in the woods until other employees departed, then return through a fire exit she'd disabled the alarm on. She'd spend her off hours living in her hidden room, coming out occasionally to use store bathrooms or steal food from the break room vending machines. The sophistication was staggering. She'd learned to avoid security cameras, understood our inventory systems well enough to steal without triggering alerts, and had maintained this deception for over a year while working alongside us daily. I immediately called store manager Robert Martinez and Cedar Park Police. This was theft, trespassing, and potentially criminal property damage for the modifications she'd made to the building. When officers arrived, Jennifer was in her hidden room during her lunch break, heating soup on her stolen camping stove. She didn't resist arrest, but seemed genuinely surprised that anyone had discovered her setup. "I wasn't hurting anyone," she told police. "I was still doing my job. I just needed somewhere to live." The investigation revealed Jennifer had stolen approximately $8,000 worth of merchandise over 14 months. But her theft was so gradual and strategic that our loss prevention systems never flagged it. She'd been taking single items from large displays, one pillow from a 6-pack, individual cans from case packs. Jennifer had essentially conducted a master class in retail theft, taking only what wouldn't be missed while maintaining her employment and avoiding suspicion. During questioning, she revealed more about her operation. She'd been using the store's Wi-Fi for internet access, charging her phone at employee charging stations, and showering at a nearby 24-hour gym where she maintained a membership. Her car registration showed she'd been using a friend's address for mail delivery. To everyone outside Walmart, Jennifer appeared to be a functioning adult with housing and employment. Only her coworkers saw her daily, and they had no reason to suspect she was homeless. The psychological evaluation revealed Jennifer suffered from severe financial anxiety stemming from childhood poverty. Rather than seek assistance when evicted, she developed an elaborate survival strategy that felt safer than admitting vulnerability or asking for help. Jennifer Walsh pleaded guilty to theft, criminal trespass, and property damage. She received 3 years probation and was ordered to pay restitution to Walmart. She was also banned from all Walmart properties nationwide. The store had to seal the access point Jennifer created and conduct a complete inventory audit to determine the full extent of her theft. We also upgraded our security procedures, including motion detectors in storage areas and more frequent overnight facility checks. The case taught me that the most successful theft operations come from people who understand your systems intimately. Jennifer wasn't a career criminal. She was a desperate employee who used her inside knowledge to exploit our vulnerabilities. But what haunts me most is how long she maintained this deception. 14 months of living inside our store while working alongside us daily. She attended employee meetings, participated in training sessions, even received performance evaluations, all while secretly homeless and systematically stealing from us. We'd created policies to prevent external theft but never considered that an employee might be living inside our building. Jennifer exploited that blind spot perfectly. The hardest part was realizing she'd been in genuine distress while working with us every day, but felt her only option was elaborate deception rather than asking for help. Our employee assistance programs existed, but Jennifer never felt safe enough to use them. I still work loss prevention, but I look at employee behavior differently now. Sometimes the most reliable workers are the ones hiding the biggest secrets. Sometimes theft isn't about greed, it's about survival. How well do you really know your coworkers' living situations? Have you ever suspected someone at work was dealing with problems they weren't sharing? What would drive someone to such elaborate deception instead of asking for help? I've worked night security at Greenwood Memorial Cemetery in Plano for 6 years. What I discovered about William Garrett in May 2024 revealed how grief can transform someone into something unrecognizable. Greenwood spans 47 acres with over 15,000 graves dating back to 1892. My job involves preventing vandalism, deterring homeless encampments, and ensuring the grounds remain secure overnight. Most nights are quiet. Occasional teenagers drinking beer, rare vandalism attempts, nothing serious. That changed when I noticed the Flower Man. On May 3rd, during my 11 p.m. patrol in my 2021 Ford Explorer, I spotted someone walking between headstones carrying what appeared to be a large bag. Male figure, average height, moving methodically through sections C where our oldest graves are located. Cemetery policy prohibited visitors after sunset. I approached with my flashlight, expecting to escort out another grieving family member who'd lost track of time. "Sir, the cemetery is closed. You'll need to leave immediately." The man turned slowly. William Garrett, probably mid-50s, wearing a worn flannel jacket and carrying a canvas bag that clinked softly when he moved. His eyes were red-rimmed, like he'd been crying, but his expression was eerily calm. "I'm just bringing flowers," he said quietly. "They get lonely at night." I looked around. Fresh flowers had been placed on at least 12 graves in the immediate area: roses, carnations, daisies, all different types. The arrangements looked professional, expensive. "These are beautiful, sir, but you can't be here after hours. Cemetery rules." Garrett nodded politely. "Of course. I understand." He walked toward the main gate without argument, but something felt off about his compliance. The next night, I found more flowers. Section D this time. 23 graves with fresh arrangements. All different flowers, all professionally done, all placed overnight while I was patrolling other areas of the cemetery. I checked our security cameras. At 2:17 a.m., Garrett had climbed the fence near the maintenance shed, avoiding our main entrance cameras. He'd spent 3 hours systematically placing flowers on graves, working by moonlight without using any artificial light source. On May 6th, I positioned myself to intercept him. Garrett arrived at 1:45 a.m., scaling the fence with surprising agility for his age. His canvas bag contained dozens of individual flower arrangements: roses, lilies, carnations, baby's breath, all wrapped with small cards. "Mr. Garrett, we need to talk." He wasn't surprised to see me. "Officer, I know this looks strange, but these people need flowers. Their families don't visit anymore." I examined the nearest grave. Harold Peterson, died 1987. The headstone was weathered, clearly hadn't been maintained in years. Garrett had placed a beautiful rose arrangement with a handwritten card. "Thank you for your service, Harold. You're not forgotten." "How do you know about Harold Peterson?" "I researched them," Garrett replied matter-of-factly. "I visit during the day, read the headstones, then go to the library and look up their obituaries. Learn about their lives, their families, what they meant to people." Over the next hour, Garrett showed me his system. He carried a notebook with detailed information about dozens of deceased individuals, their birth dates, professions, family members, military service, community involvement. He'd compiled comprehensive biographical profiles of strangers buried in our cemetery. "Mrs. Eleanor Martinez was a kindergarten teacher for 37 years, he explained, placing daisies on her grave. "She never married, dedicated her life to educating children. Her obituary said she loved daisies." The dedication was unsettling but seemed harmless. Garrett was spending his own money buying flowers for forgotten graves, motivated by what appeared to be genuine compassion for the deceased. I called my supervisor, explaining the situation. We decided to allow Garrett to continue with restrictions: daylight hours only, check-in with security, no climbing fences. But Garrett's behavior began escalating in concerning ways. On May 12th, I found him during my day's shift, sitting beside a grave talking quietly to the headstone. Margaret Daniels, died 2019. He'd been there for 3 hours, having what appeared to be a complete conversation with the deceased. "She's telling me about her grandson Tommy," Garrett explained when I approached. "He's struggling with addiction, needs prayers." "Sir, you're talking to a headstone." "I'm talking to Margaret. She worries about Tommy constantly." I learned Garrett had been visiting Margaret Daniels' family, claiming the deceased had asked him to check on them. He'd shown up at their home uninvited, offering prayers and asking about Tommy's recovery progress. The family called police, reporting a strange man who claimed their dead grandmother was communicating with him about family problems. Detective Amanda Foster from Plano PD interviewed Garrett and discovered the full scope of his activities. He'd been contacting families of deceased individuals buried in Greenwood, claiming their loved ones had spoken to him about unfinished business, family concerns, or messages they wanted delivered. Garrett had convinced himself he could communicate with the dead. "The deceased tell me things," Garrett told Detective Foster. "Personal information about their families, concerns about living relatives, requests for help with unresolved issues. They trust me to help them." The investigation revealed Garrett's psychological state had deteriorated significantly following his wife's death 18 months earlier. Patricia Garrett had been buried at Greenwood Memorial, and William had initially been visiting her grave daily, bringing flowers and talking to her headstone. Over time, his grief had manifested as delusions of communication with all the deceased buried in the cemetery. He believed the dead were speaking to him, sharing their concerns about living family members and requesting his intervention in their affairs. The families he'd contacted were traumatized by his intrusions. Garrett possessed detailed knowledge about their deceased relatives that he'd gathered from obituaries, social media research, and public records. To grieving families, his information seemed impossible for a stranger to know, making his claims of supernatural communication more disturbing. "He knew things about my mother that weren't in her obituary," said Robert Martinez, whose mother was buried in Section F. "Personal details about her childhood, her fears about my father's health. It was terrifying." Garrett had been conducting elaborate research on deceased individuals, then using that information to convince himself and others that he was receiving supernatural communications. His nightly flower deliveries were part of a complex delusion system where he believed he was helping trapped souls communicate with the living world. The psychological evaluation revealed Garrett suffered from complicated grief disorder complicated by delusional thinking. His wife's death had triggered a psychological break where he developed elaborate fantasies about helping other deceased individuals resolve their earthly concerns. On May 20th, the situation became dangerous. Garrett appeared at the home of Janet Wilson, whose husband Thomas was buried at Greenwood. He told her that Thomas was concerned about their teenage daughter Sarah's relationship with an older boy and wanted Janet to intervene immediately. The information was accurate. Sarah had been secretly seeing a 22-year-old man her parents disapproved of. But Garrett's knowledge came from weeks of surveillance of the Wilson family, not supernatural communication. When Janet Wilson refused to listen to Garrett's message from her husband, he became agitated and insisted she couldn't ignore her deceased husband's warnings. The confrontation escalated until Wilson called police. Officers found Garrett in his 2015 Honda Accord outside the Wilson home, with detailed surveillance notes about the family's daily routines, photographs of their house, and personal information gathered from social media stalking. William Garrett was arrested for stalking, harassment, and criminal trespass. The investigation revealed he'd been conducting surveillance on families of over 30 deceased individuals buried at Greenwood Cemetery. His apartment contained an elaborate shrine dedicated to his research, photos of headstones, family genealogies, detailed biographical profiles, and what he called message logs, documenting his supposed communications with the dead. During his psychiatric evaluation, Garrett maintained his ability to communicate with deceased individuals was real. He couldn't accept that his messages came from stalking and research rather than supernatural sources. William Garrett pleaded guilty to multiple stalking and harassment charges. He received 2 years in county jail and was ordered to undergo comprehensive mental health treatment. He's banned from all cemeteries in Collin County. Greenwood Memorial upgraded security with motion sensors and additional cameras. We also implemented policies requiring background checks for anyone requesting information about buried individuals. The case taught me that grief can manifest in ways that seem charitable but mask dangerous delusions. Garrett genuinely believed he was helping both the deceased and their families, but his methods terrorized vulnerable people dealing with their own loss. What disturbs me most is how his extensive research made his delusions seem credible. Families believed he possessed supernatural knowledge because he'd gathered so much personal information through stalking and surveillance. The line between honoring the dead and exploiting grief is thinner than people realize. Have you ever encountered someone whose grief seemed to manifest in unusual or concerning ways? How would you react if a stranger approached you claiming to have messages from a deceased family member? Thanks so much for watching. I can't express enough how much your support means. The likes, the comments, it all really helps the channel grow. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. I always take the time to read them. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss out on any new videos. See you next time.